I would like to call this meeting to order. Good morning. So I would like to call the Niagara Police Services Board Finance Committee meeting to order for October 12th, 2023. My name is Laura Yip, and I am Chair of the Board's Finance Committee. We begin this meeting this morning by acknowledging that Niagara region is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations such as the Hattaway-Wendourong, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The Regional Municipality of Niagara Police Services Board stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. And I'll do a roll call. Member Kiokio.
Present.
Member Kapasavanu.
Present.
Chair Lawson.
Present.
Member McKendrick.
Present.
Member Steele.
Here.
And Vice Chair Eek sends his regrets. Do any board members have any declarations of conflict or pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Adoption of minutes. There are no minutes from any previous meetings to adopt. So we'll move into presentations. We have item 5.1, Niagara Regional Police Service 2024 Proposed Operating Budget. Chief McCulloch will provide the board with a presentation on the 2024 Proposed Operating Budget for the Niagara Regional Police Service. A copy of the presentation slide deck is attached to our reports. Chief McCulloch.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Rip, board members, staff members, and members of our community for the opportunity to present our proposed 2024 operating budget to you. I want to thank our entire senior leadership team, in particular our finance team, for their time, dedication, and efforts throughout this process. In presenting the proposed 2024 operating budget, I appreciate the opportunity to provide some context as well as speak to the careful and thoughtful analysis that brought us to this point today. We've spent a considerable amount of time looking at the reality of our landscape, as well as the pressures that we are facing as a police service as we continue to focus on our main priority, which is the safety of our region, the residents, and those who visit Niagara. We wanted to ensure that the budget that we present to you keeps that in the forefront while also being fiscally responsible. The overall structure of the service is driven and supports our mission statement, and that being the Niagara Regional Police Service is dedicated to serving and protecting residents and visitors within the Regional Municipality of Niagara. In partnership with the community, we shall provide quality police service with integrity, diligence, and sensitivity. It's mandated that all provincial adequacy standards are upheld by the board as set out in the Police Services Act, and that we continue to deliver adequate and effective policing to our communities. As the board knows and fully appreciates matters relating to the sustainability of policing, the need for those involved in public safety to contain costs, and for police services to operate as effectively and efficiently as possible, are expectations that are placed upon all police services by their community, by police service boards, elected officials, and their funding providers. In the board's strategic plan, which spans from 2022 to 2025, 4 overarching goals were identified: public safety, community engagement and collaboration, continuous improvement and organizational continuity, and member wellness. These 4 areas serve as a framework to guide our service while also supporting the Niagara Regional Council's strategic priorities. During the creation of the board's strategic plan, the consultation process was extensive to ensure that we were hearing from stakeholders across Niagara, in addition to a public town hall, to ensure that we were hearing from and serving our entire community. This framework, developed in consultation with those stakeholders, sets the board's benchmark for adequate and effective policing. Goal 1 of that strategic plan was focusing on public safety, and we have ensured a focus on numerous initiatives and projects throughout the past year as we look to meet our objectives of reducing violent crime, reducing property crime, reducing opioid use and the harms associated, effective response to calls for service, and enhancing public safety. These initiatives by both our frontline patrol as well as our investigative units all ensure that we're continuing to strengthen our relationship and continuing to build trust and confidence within our community. Goal 2, community engagement and collaboration. We do this by focusing our programs to ensure that we're meeting the ever-changing needs of our community by continuing to evolve. The Community-Oriented Response and Engagement Unit, or the CORE unit, is a prime example of this adaptability. We implemented the CORE unit to better position our service to facilitate youth engagement, community outreach, and a focus on problem-oriented policing through a district-level unit to directly address community issues and concerns. We continue to focus on enhancing our relationships with the Indigenous community through an ongoing effort to engage and build that trust, as well as focusing on enhancing relationships with newcomers to Canada while fostering transparency and enhancing the public's understanding of our police services. Our mobile crisis rapid response team, or MCERT, continues to function in St. Catharines and Thorold, as well as Niagara Falls and Niagara-on-the-Lake, as a key part of our response to persons in crisis. In addition to the resumption of services in 3 districts, which will cover Welland and Pelham, which was just recently announced with some provincial funding, which you may have seen yesterday in the news. The expansion of situation tables across Niagara, driven by the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, are another key component of addressing our community needs in a variety of ways. When we look at continuous improvement and organizational continuity, we have numerous initiatives currently underway, including a transition to Next Generation 911, or commonly referred to as NG 911. This system will improve public emergency communication services in a growing wireless mobile society. In addition to calling 911 from a phone, it intends to enable the public to transmit text, images, video, and data to our communications unit. We're also seeing the implementation of the Digital Evidence Management System, or DEMS, as well as the creation of the Office of Continuous Improvement and Innovation as we continue to modernize service delivery. And Goal 8, member wellness and resiliency, is a key strategic focus as we promote a culture of resiliency with our members to best serve our community. Through ongoing implementation of our mental health strategy, we're ensuring the destigmatization of mental health-related challenges. We are also actively working to promote a culture that embraces equity, diversity, and inclusion through work with our internal Inclusion Council, as well as the Chief of Police Community Inclusion Council. Additionally, this year we have seen the continued emphasis on the Stop Hate Niagara campaign, which focuses on education regarding hate crimes versus hate incidents, and really aims to break down barriers to reporting to ensure that any hate-motivated incident is reported for a fulsome investigation. When we look at the Niagara region in a snapshot, we see a population being over 484,000 residents, forecasted to be over 510,000 in 2023, not including the tourism influx, with a considerable land and water policing area that our members actively patrol as well as respond to calls for service. Our waterways also require police resources, with our marine unit actively patrolling 1,500 square kilometers of waterway. In addition, the 3 border crossings, actually 4 if we include the Whirlpool Bridge, provides additional challenges along with the demands created through tourism to the region as well. From a facility perspective, there are 6 districts across the region, along with 3 other buildings that house our training unit, our fleet and quartermaster, as well as our emergency services. We know that as members of a police services board, you are always looking forward and considering ways to build a better community. It's not lost on this police service that the region is anticipated to grow substantially over the next several years. Effectively, we are having to plan now for neighborhoods and communities that don't currently exist, and how to ensure that we're prepared for the growth and investment in community safety. We also need to consider the impact of non-residents. The region welcomes 13 million visitors annually, over 30,000 students and staff affiliated to Brock University and Niagara College, and seasonal residents living in a number of municipalities across the region. Niagara is an aging community, a retirement destination for those in larger cities, and we continue to see an influx of new international residents to the region. Niagara is also host to a number of special events, including cultural activities and festivals, seasonal festivals like Canal Days and the Niagara Wine Festival, the Shaw Festival, and is a sought-after destination to celebrate Canada Day and New Year's Eve. Like other police services, our levels of service change and vary. Our calls for service have continued to rise, and we continue to adapt to evolving trends and challenges such as human trafficking, opioid enforcement and education, mental health, and those who are unhomed and other quality of life related occurrences. Under the Police Services Act, police agencies are responsible to provide adequate and effective policing services which ensure the safety of the community. To meet these objectives, police services develop strategic plans in concert with their police services board, which create an organizational model specific to the unique needs and priorities of the local community. The annual operating budget reflects both the requirements under the Act as well as the unique requirements identified within our local communities, which have a financial impact and add cost pressures to our budget, which includes sustaining core services, increased workload demands, increasing complexity in policing, the financial and technological pressures, supporting our strategic plan, and supporting our frontline operations. The operating budget is a financial representation of service resources necessary to sustain core policing services in the Niagara region. As a starting point to our budget process, we need to consider those changes between the 2023 and 2024 calendar years that have a financial impact to our service. For example, there are 2 additional budget days in 2024 versus 2023, and when adjusted, impacts the 2024 budget by $1 million. These additional funds simply allow us to provide the same level of service in 2024 as in 2023. Secondly, we're bound to contractual wage settlements that includes a 2% cost of living wage increase, which on a budget that is 90% salaries makes a significant impact. This adds $3.6 million to the 2024 budget. Legislated statutory benefits such as Canada Pension and employment insurance premiums increase annually, and that impacts not just the police services but all employers. Further benefit entitlements such as health and dental are increasing due to the rising drug and paramedical service rates usage. This cost pressure on the service adds $2.1 million to our 2024 budget. Service enhancements, including mid-year in 2023, aligns the budget with realistic recruitment timelines, which requires additional 2024 budget of $800,000 to fund a full year. Policing is becoming more complex and dependent on technology. These advancements are creating additional cost pressures of $500,000. high annual inflation for 2022 and 2023 exceeds the previous budget estimates of 3% and are impacting our budget by an additional $300,000. To ensure that our asset replacement strategy is aligned with the region's asset management plan and capital financing strategy, it's necessary to increase our capital budget financing by $320,000 annually. So to recap, to sustain our core services that were approved in 2023, the service requires $8.6 million to be added to the 2024 proposed operating budget. Simply put, this is just restating our 2023 budget in 2024 dollars. Looking year over year, there have been a consistent upward trend in calls for service. 2022 from 2021, we saw a 0.3% increase, which can be partially attributed to an initial dip in calls for service due to the pandemic, but also an overall increase in call volume. Beginning May 1st, 2021, the service through our communications unit began using a new priority dispatch code, which includes a priority 6 call. This category includes various calls that do not require an officer to be dispatched. However, better quantifies the work being done within the unit and service-wide, along with us to better track interactions with members of the public. Along with an increase in calls for service across the board, we're seeing increased pressures for response. Violent crime has remained steady, property crimes have risen, and we are seeing a considerable increase in mental health calls for service. Armed barricaded persons continue to be a concern, with each call requiring a considerable amount of resources to safely and quickly ensure community safety. With that in mind, the current policing landscape is increasingly complex. As we move into the realm of digital evidence, while incredibly beneficial, it adds an additional layer to investigations in the collection and review of vast amounts of information. Additionally, legislative and judicial requirements continue to add to frontline as well as investigative responses. With an ever-diversifying community, language and cultural barriers prove to be a challenge to overcome by our members as well. We're working to address this with several initiatives such as the Stop Hate Niagara campaign that I referenced earlier, which saw the information translated into several languages, as well as working with our deaf and hard of hearing community to better serve all residents. In addition, as a service, we are continuing to realize the value of reliance on evidence-based policing to guide us as a multifaceted and complex industry. Evidence-based policing is an intersection of academic research and policing in a way that provides the most effective solutions in the most efficient manner. It capitalizes on years of policing experience and uses scientific research and statistical analysis to hone those practices. For evidence-based practices to be planned and implemented effectively, a wide range of research, evidence, practice expertise, and client perspective must be considered. Financial and technology pressures also continue to play a factor as well. Specifically, the evolution of digital evidence management has streamlined the process of capturing, managing, and sharing all platforms of digital evidence with policing and our judicial partners. The service has purchased and is currently utilizing cloud-based software for digital evidence management, known as the DEMS system, with our strategic goal of integrating with the Connected Officer program for a fully integrated digital evidence environment. The Connected Officer program, which was approved as part of the 2023 operating budget, adds cellular data and electronic duty book notes, or e-notes software, speaking specifically to the objective within the strategic plan of modernizing service delivery, which will result in efficiencies in processing evidence. This will extend our goal of innovation to frontline members to better meet their information and intelligence needs while creating efficiencies and operational excellence for the service as a whole. As the board is well aware, NG 911 is on the horizon, which will drastically alter the way that we receive calls for service. And the service, as well as coping with the high annual inflation that we are seeing, creating pressures across the community and, in fact, across the country. As I will outline in the upcoming proposed program changes, each and every investment is in alignment with supporting the board's strategic plan. There are dedicated resources within the budget that are vital to achieving the goals and objectives as identified to ensure adequate and effective policing within Niagara. In 2019, the service undertook a frontline workload study called Managing Patrol Performance, or MPP. The study recognized a significant shortage in frontline resources in order to meet targeted response times for highest priority calls and response to community needs. As a result of this study, the service proposed an increase to the frontline complement of 40 constables, which was approved in the 2020 annual operating budget. These officers were allocated between our three largest districts, covering St. Catharines, Thorold, Niagara Falls, Niagara Lake, Welland, and Pelham. In 2023, the service has completed another MPP study to reassess the frontline workload, response times, and the impact of those additional 40 officers who were hired in the 2021 calendar year. The study identified significant changes that have occurred since the 2019 MPP study, and these changes have not allowed the service to fully realize the benefits of those 40 officers on the front line. Firstly, 2 legislative changes occurred during this period that have increased unavailable hours and protected leave hours. On March 17, 2019, the parental sharing benefit was introduced, which provides parents with an additional 5 or 8 weeks of employment insurance parental benefits. This is only one factor that has resulted in the service realizing a 187% increase in maternity and parental leave hours taken by frontline constables in 2022 over 2019. Additionally, on January 1st, 2018, WSIB legislation was amended to include post-traumatic stress disorder as an eligible workplace injury for first responders. The full impact of this legislative change was not yet known during the 2019 study, but the service has realized a 110% increase in WSIB hours for frontline constables in 2022 over 2018. To quantify the impact of these increases since the 2019 MPP study, the service has lost the equivalent of 8 frontline constables to protected leaves strictly due to these legislative changes alone. During this time period, a new collective agreement began on January 1st, 2021, which included changes to minimum staffing requirements in 3 districts and sick plan amendments. These changes have further impacted frontline officer availability. The 2023 MPP study identified that target response times are not being met for the large districts that received those additional resources in 2020. Upon closer examination as to why these targets are not being met, it was noted that the service is constantly and consistently redeploying frontline officers from these larger districts into the smaller districts, and therefore we are not realizing the full benefits of the additional resources that were received. Excessive reliance on cross-district redeployments have been required to ensure that the smaller districts are meeting their minimum staffing requirements as set out in the collective agreement. These minimum staffing requirements are necessary to ensure officer safety, but also an appropriate community response. With increased protected leaves and unavailable hours, the authorized strength in some of the smaller districts no longer supports minimum staffing. Adjusted for shift relief to meet minimum staffing in 6th District, which serves Port Colborne and Waynflete, an authorized strength of 8 constables per platoon is required, and the current levels only provides for 6 constables per platoon. In 8th District, which covers Grimsby, Lincoln, and West Lincoln, an authorized strength of 9 constables per platoon is required, while current levels only provide for 8 constables. When we look at increased workloads, we're putting forward several programs that would directly look to address these demands. A uniform crime report, or UCR clerk, reviews, analyzes, and classifies police reports, compiling statistics, and prepares reports in accordance with the Canadian Centre for Justice and Community Safety Statistics, also known as CCJCSS. All levels of government then utilize these statistics for policy and legislative development, as well as distribution of police resources. Given current staffing levels, they are unable to meet these responsibilities on a continuous basis. Adding 1 UCR clerk will allow the unit to review, analyze, and classify more reports each month, increasing the quality of our data submission and ensuring that this mandatory requirement of the Statistics Act is met on a monthly basis. Currently, our 3-district core unit consists of 2 constables and 1 sergeant. Growth in South Niagara and the demand on the current staffing has now exceeded their capacity as we see more demand for this program. An additional constable would enable the unit to implement service initiatives and respond to community needs in an appropriate capacity, while also supporting our frontline officers. Speaking to the increased growth in 3-district, we are also proposing 2 additional detective constables within the detective office, given the increased demand for investigations, the complexity of investigations, as well as stringent timelines that must be met for disclosure. The unit is currently understaffed. In 2017, the Opioid Enforcement and Education Unit, or OEEU, was established to investigate and reduce the availability of opioids in Niagara. Operating as part of the province's Community Safety and Policing Grant, the 2 constables assigned to the unit are mandated to raise public awareness and provide education regarding the dangers of opioid misuse. The unit learned a growing number of criminal investigations occurring across Canada, which assesses the causal relation between drug trafficking and overdose-related deaths. Since January 2022, the unit has adopted this model of investigation into opioid-related sudden deaths. To date, they have laid numerous serious criminal charges in relation to overdose deaths, including manslaughter. As the board may have seen yesterday as well, several charges were laid against 3 individuals following community complaints pertaining to drug activity at a home in St. Catharines. It's important to note that these charges, as they move through the court system, continue to impact the overall workload of this 2-person unit. This new approach is victim-centric, allowing members of the unit to focus on the families and the victims who have been affected by opioid-related sudden deaths. Quite simply, the demand placed on the 2 current detectives is unsustainable. The 2 additional detective constables will keep pace with the current workload while also supporting the objective within the strategic plan to reduce opioid use through an increase in the number of outreach initiatives. Proposed regulations under the Community Safety and Policing Act outline additional training requirements for sworn and professional staff members of the police service. These new requirements will represent an expanded curriculum to be delivered by our training unit that's not currently in a position to manage the anticipated increase in required training. By adding a training constable, the service will be better positioned to plan, respond, and initiate the training requirements that will be mandating within the new legislation. When we look at increasing complexity of policing, there are 3 positions that we are putting forward in a direct effort to continue to adapt and support our frontline and investigative services. In October 2022, a service delivery group was established to review organizational structure and our authorized strength. As part of that review, investigative support services was conducted, aiming to establish a unified reporting line for all investigative units of the service and subsequent staffing support at the inspector level within ISS, which is Investigative Support Services. At the moment, there are 65 detectives assigned to general assignments, as well as street crime units in districts across the region that are reporting through their respective district commander. The increased complexity of investigations requires additional oversight, supervision, and guidance beyond the current capacity of district commanders. Adding an inspector of investigative support would allow a unified reporting line for all investigations and create better oversight by reducing demand on district commanders to allow them to focus on supporting frontline and community safety concerns. In our major crime and homicide unit, detectives oversee all criminal investigations involving homicides, sudden deaths, and various Special Investigations Unit or SIU investigations. The sheer volume of digital and forensic evidence created by an abundance of devices available, such as cell phones and video data, and the associated analysis has subsequently increased workload demand exponentially. At this moment, the unit utilizes a violent crime analyst who collects, organizes, and returns data to detectives for their own analysis. As the complexity of homicide investigations increases, so does the demand for thorough and dedicated analysis. The unit requires a full-time, dedicated major crime analysis to be able to work alongside detectives to identify crime patterns, draw linkages between victims, suspects, and victims, while allowing the detective to dedicate more time to the investigative requirements. Additionally, the increased complexity and diversity of criminal activities in this region, coupled with limited resources, necessitates a strategic approach that integrates data-driven analysis. The absence of a dedicated crime analysis supervisor hinders the service's ability to maximize the potential of available data and develop actionable intelligence to combat crime more effectively. A crime analysis supervisor will address the current gaps in data analysis and intelligence gathering. This position will be responsible for leading a team of existing crime analysts and leveraging their expertise to develop accurate and timely crime assessments, predictive models, and operational recommendations. Along with the increased complexity of policing and workload demands, we're also seeing pressures resulting from financial and technological advancements. As the service continues to rely heavily on technology, maintaining a secure and efficient network infrastructure is critical for safeguarding sensitive data, ensuring uninterrupted business operations, and mitigating the risks associated with cyber threats. By investing in a network and security administrator, the service can enhance its network performance, strengthen its defenses against cyber attacks, and adhere to security standards and regulatory compliance. Further, it allows the service to respond effectively to security incidents. Currently, we face several challenges, including network complexity, data breaches, and security threats, as well as compliance requirements. This position will allow us to strengthen defenses against cyber attacks and ensure that all assets and information are safeguarded, while also positioning the service to better able to implement upcoming projects, including NG911. We as a service acknowledge the importance of consistent and dedicated presence to maintain a proactive approach to hardware replacement. While the service aims to replace 20% of its hardware annually, it has faced some challenges over the past several years in achieving this goal. With the introduction of the additional full-time equipment support technician, the service expects to revitalize its hardware replacement cycle and ensure optimal end-user productivity. Excuse me. This will allow for a reduction in wait times, which impacts productivity across the service, as well as it will fully support the Connected Officer program and allow frontline and investigative members to realize efficiencies. As we approach the implementation of NG 911, we will see further training requirements within the communications unit. The implementation of NG 911 will require continuous expansion of the technology to include text, video, and telemetry. As these features evolve, it is anticipated to add additional training requirements over the next several years. Currently, there is one training coordinator responsible for all in-house training, recruit interviews, hiring, and basic training for all communicators within the service. The service has recognized that a second training coordinator is necessary to keep pace with current training and recruiting requirements. The communications unit is the largest professional staff unit within the NRPS, operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The unit is the first point of contact for emergency 911 calls, non-emergency calls, and direct support for frontline officers through dispatch functions. A second training coordinator will ensure the availability of training, the hiring of communicators, and in-service training to existing employees, while also ensuring capacity is available for the implementation of NG 911. I spoke earlier regarding Digital Evidence Management System, or DEMS, as well as the Connected Officer Program. The reality is, with the evolution in technology and new programs comes the need for growth on the people side as well. The current staffing model of accommodated sworn and professional civilian staff is not capable of effectively expanding the DEMS pilot project into a fully integrated system. The request is for 4 DEMS civilian specialists to facilitate the expansion of the digital evidence. An increase of 4 additional DEMS clerks will be necessary to manage the volume of evidence that will be captured, and the need for effective disclosure will be paramount. These new positions will be a recognition of the anticipated volumes of digital evidence noted in the initial request, and since confirmed by other police services who have entered into a full DEMS program and reported initial staffing shortages. The service aims to establish the Office of Strategic Planning and Innovation as set out in the strategic plan by providing the necessary staffing. Right now, senior members are at a capacity with the daily operational activities of the service, and the service has identified a need for project coordinators to take on oversight of major strategic projects within the service. Completing these projects can significantly enhance the service's performance and ability to utilize all of its current resources to their full potential. 2 enterprise project coordinator positions will not only introduce to the service the expert professional project management knowledge needed to manage large, complex, enterprise-wide projects, but they will also act as a unified driving force which will coordinate the resources and efforts often needed from multiple departments within the police service. In addition to enhanced project coordination, these positions will enable optimizing resource allocation, create a culture of standardized project management, and better strategically align projects with the overall vision of the service and the board's strategic plan. The internet and social media have drastically changed the way the service communicates and interacts with members of the public. The corporate communications unit supports internal and external strategies to ensure timely and accurate information is provided to our community, often through social media. The addition of a visual content creator will ensure an increased focus on conveying information in a rapidly evolving climate to ensure public trust, confidence, and public safety is maintained. With the increase of violent incidents in the region, in addition to an increase in investigative activity, day-to-day emergent media relations requirements are taking the majority of the focus of the unit, limiting the ability to engage in strategic, proactive community engagement and public safety initiatives. A visual content creator will better position the corporate communications unit to engage proactively on a strategic community engagement and public safety initiatives. As I referenced earlier, due to several factors, including changes to protected leaves, in particular maternity and parental leaves, as well as WSIB, as well as cross-district redeployments to meet contractual minimum staffing requirements, there is an urgent need to hire additional officers to stabilize our frontline resources. To support minimum staffing requirements, the service requires an additional 3 frontline constables per platoon for a total of 12 constables to be assigned between 6th District, which serves Port Colborne and Wainfleet, and 8th District, which serves Grimsby, Lincoln, and West Lincoln. This will provide the necessary supports for growing communities within the region while alleviating the requirement to regularly deploy officers from 1 district, 2 district, and 3 districts, which are our larger districts, to the smaller districts. With the addition of officers, the service would be able to meet the dual objective of increasing the number of officers available in smaller districts while meeting target response times in the larger districts as well. The 20 officers in total, 8 frontline constables to offset the impact associated to increase protected leave utilization, as well as 12 frontline constables to increase authorized strength in those areas of the region experiencing significant growth, will allow a stabilization of our frontline while also reducing the impact of cross-district deployment. In the process of compiling the 2024 proposed operating budget, we also examined existing delivery models to review for efficiencies and opportunities. I'm going to walk you through a couple of examples where this took place. Our Records and Information Management Unit currently includes CPIC operations clerks over 4 platoons, providing 24/7 coverage. These positions report to 1 record supervisor who works a standard 8-hour business day. As a result, there's no direct supervision of the CPIC clerks on evenings, holidays, and weekends. By eliminating 4 CPIC operation clerk positions and creating 4 CPIC lead positions, this allows for constant and proper supervision. This operational efficiency results in a more consistent approach to supervision as well as no financial impact to the overall budget. In addition, a review of the and reorganization of special constables has resulted in the elimination of 1 special constable in prisoner handling and 3 special constables in court services, with an increase of 4 special constables in our wash court, which is the weekend and statutory holiday court. This realizes efficiencies that were gained due to changes to video bail court that were initiated in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and ensures properly staffed video bail court in response to the Ministry of the Attorney General requirements. Again, there's no financial impact on the overall operating budget as a result of this change. Just highlights and demonstrates that we're always looking at efficiencies and how we can better serve and manage the resources that we have. As detailed throughout this presentation, our 2024 budget approach is evidence-based and addresses the numerous pressures on the service. The program changes presented to you reflects the external pressures placed upon the service to meet workload demands, address the complexity of policing, technological advancements, and employer legislated statutory benefits. The impact of program changes to our 2024 proposed operating budget is $3.9 million, which represents a 2.3% increase over our 2023 approved operating budget. The annual cost for these proposed programs based on 2024 budget dollars is $5.8 million, and therefore $1.8 million will be deferred to the 2025 budget to reflect the mid-year implementation of 3 programs within 2024. As previously mentioned, we strive to align our budget with realistic recruitment timelines. It takes several months to recruit an officer, and when budgets are not approved until mid-December, it's not realistic to expect that an officer can be in a budgeted position on January 1st. This budget provides a responsible and realistic request for resources. To recap, our budget for 2024 includes funding to sustain core services and response to external pressures. To sustain our existing core services to 2023 levels will require a base budget increase of $8.3 million or 4.6%. The long-term capital funding strategy introduced in 2022 requires an annual increase of $320,000 or 0.2% per year until 2029. Again, this strategy is aligned with the region's capital financing strategy, which aims to reduce the burden of debt financing and its associated debt costs. Finally, this service is requesting an increase of 2.3% over the 2023 approved budget to address the impacts of workload demands, increased complexity of policing, technology advancement, maintaining a skilled workforce, and operational effectiveness through continuous improvement. In conclusion, in preparing the proposed 2024 budget that's before you today, we've taken a holistic approach to ensure that we have the necessary resources in place to adequately and effectively serve our community. In keeping with the themes that have identified through the strategic planning process, the service remains committed to public safety, community engagement and collaboration, continuous improvement, and organizational continuity, as well as member wellness and resiliency. These 4 areas of focus are interconnected and ultimately come together to ensure that we can deliver on our commitment to public safety. Chair Ip, this concludes our presentation, and at this time I would invite any questions from the committee in regards to our proposed 2024 operating budget and the various program changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief McCulloch, for your presentation. Can I have members Capasavanu and McKendrick move that the presentation be received? And then if there are no objections, I think it makes sense to vote to receive the presentation, then actually put the report on the floor so we can ask questions about both at the same time. Okay, so all in favor of receiving the presentation? Thank you. There are no opposed. That's carried. And so moving on to new business, 6.1 Niagara Regional Police Service 2024 proposed operating budget. Service report dated October 5th, 2023, providing the board with the 2024 proposed operating budget for the police service and the police services board, resulting in a total net expenditure budget before indirect allocations of $190,450,582, which reflects the cost of providing adequate and effective police services in Niagara Region, which represents an inflationary adjustment of 4.8% from the 2023 approved budget to maintain core services, and includes an additional 2.3% increase for service enhancements, stabilization, and growth. The motion to put on the floor is that the Finance Committee recommend the Police Services Board receive and approve the proposed 2024 operating budget for the police service and the Police Services Board, resulting in a total net expenditure budget before indirect allocations of $190,450,582, and further that the consolidated budget of the service and the board be submitted to Regional Council for approval. Can I have members Steele and Kiokio move to put that on the floor? Thank you. Before we move into discussion of the item, I'm going to take a page out of Councillor Redikoff's book, who's our budget chair at Regional Council, and I want to note that this, like all of the budgets funded by the property taxes of Niagara's residents, is another difficult budget. There are challenges within this budget that are related to external forces over which we have no control. While we are, at this table, all members of the Police Services Board, we are also, and to varying degrees, accountable to the public, and we would be remiss to not consider both what is best for the Niagara Regional Police Service and what our residents can bear through another increase to their property taxes. I'll open the floor to discussion. Member Capasavanu.
Thank you, Chief, for that presentation. It actually answered some of the questions I have, but I've just got a few more questions that I wanted to find out. The first one is around, I seem to recall in one of the meetings that we've had, and I might be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong, there was a mention of an addition to the human trafficking unit of an officer. And if there was, I didn't see that reflected in terms of cost in the budget. That's the first question, but I may be wrong about that addition.
So through you, Chair, we have received funding through grant submissions for human trafficking investigators. So those investigators remain in place. We have not asked for any additional human trafficking investigators at this point in time. But those investigators remain within our existing carryover budget from 2023.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Chair, just to add to those grants, considering the grant was approved yesterday for MCERT, I saw that is the budget going to reflect that change because the budget is for 2023-24, right?
Through you, Chair. So the funds that we've applied through a grant from the province is in partnership with the Canadian Mental Health Association, and the funds that we receive, which was announced that we would receive up to $120,000 to continue with the MCERT program in 3 District, is really a flow-through. So the money that we receive goes through to the Canadian Mental Health Association to pay for the mental health professionals that work alongside of our officers on the road. So that funding will flow through to CMHA.
Thank you.
I'm assuming everybody has questions, so Chair Lawson.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. It was very thorough. I was making notes ahead of time, and my questions were getting answered as I was speaking, so really appreciate the extra effort into the presentation. A couple of questions. I just want, or actually comments first. I want to make it clear that we've been around, many of us as board members have attended presentations with City Council as well as the regional council members, and I really appreciate the fact, again, to Chair Yip's comments about Mayor Redekop, balancing off the challenges of a tough budget, accordingly, though, with the growth that we're seeing within the region and the requirements. A couple of comments that I have, some of them may be comments, some of them may be questions. I just want to, I had written down here that as we're adding our frontline officers, it's really important to identify the additional costs that we're going to be seeing with adding additional people, whether they're frontline officers or other people. So there's things like equipment, computers, desks, those types of things that have to be added as we're adding on to that. I'm sure that's all been considered within our budget. IT is obviously a very big area that we have to consider as we move to a more digital digital society, and I appreciate the fact that there was comprehensive information in there about the digital, the support functions, fleet managers, IT, HR. As we continue to grow as a service, all of those things have to be considered incrementally. So I'm glad to see that there's been thought going forward as to where we're going to need some additional support and or changing positions from coordinators to leads, those types of things. I do have a question about NG 911, and you did touch on the fact that there's going to be training for the new members. I'm curious to know if there's been any consideration to the impact to the call takers mentally, now that they may be seeing and hearing things that they may not have been seeing before. As a frontline officer, for example, or a detective, may be used to seeing different things in their workplace. I'm wondering what impact that may have to our call takers, which in turn could have an impact to our either WSIB or sick leave and things like that. And I do appreciate the fact that you talked about training is one of them, but is it on anybody's radar that there could be a mental health impact to our call takers from implementing NG 911 and the new digital technologies?
Through you, Chair, yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that's definitely been on our radar in, excuse me, in attending various conferences and hearing from our partners in the United States who have implemented NG 911. That is unfortunately one of the unintended consequences that has resulted from NG 911. Sometimes graphic video that is being shared by the caller to our communications unit. So it's definitely something that we are aware of, and we'll be working with our in-house psychologist and clinician that we have hired or are in the process of hiring as we speak to address that on a proactive basis, recognizing that we can't control what's going to be coming across, but doing our utmost to prepare our communicators for what inevitably they will be receiving, and again, preparing them for debriefs, et cetera, for to make them as resilient as possible, recognizing that without them being well, we're not able to serve our community.
Thank you. I do have another couple of comments too. Sorry, could you go over, I think you talked about it there, but the fastest growing communities, I think you said Welland was one, 3 district, and
so I think Thorold probably has the listing for being one of the fastest growing communities in the Niagara region, but certainly South Niagara with Waynfleet, Port Colborne, Welland, and Pelham, as well as we're seeing in West Niagara with Grimsby, Lincoln, and West Lincoln. So again, to address the staffing complements, or to right-size the platoons in 6 and 8 district, as well as address the exponential growth that's occurring in those areas, we're requesting those additional resources to combat those 2 issues.
thank you. Sorry, through you, Chair, another question. So you touched on the fact about the workload for parental leave and maternity leave. Can you remind me where we are at with the percentage of females to males in our policing complement?
So through you, Chair, we're at roughly 20% of our sworn officers are female. But I want to highlight as well that this, obviously we want to be as representative of our community as possible, and would love to see that the number or percentage of female officers continue to increase. But I do want to highlight it's not strictly women taking maternity leave. It's our male officers as well who are taking parental leave, which is having a significant increase as well, probably in excess of our the impact from maternity leave. So the 2 combined have resulted in 179% increase, which again, we don't anticipate that trend is going to decrease anytime soon. We hire people who are in the age group where they are going to have families, and we know that as a result of that, we can expect that members will continue to take advantage of those protected leaves. We encourage it, quite frankly. It's great for them to be able to connect with their new family members. We highlighted it because there is an impact that results from those protected leaves.
Thank you. I was actually going to go with that comment next, actually, that it was my understanding from being out to some of the districts that it is some of the males that are taking their parental leave. Sorry.
Yeah, I just actually wanted to expand just a bit further. Of our last 100 sworn officers that we've hired, 35 have been female. So we are increasing that number, but again, it takes some time to increase the percentage on a total basis within the organization.
Perfect, thank you. So I was going to also expand on that as well, saying that I'm glad to see that that percentage is continuing to increase. I think when I first started on the board a couple of years ago, it was around 18%. So I'm glad to see that that percentage is increasing. I'm glad to hear that our members are actually taking their protected leaves, because it is important for our families and for our mental health, to make sure that we're taking care of our families as well. That's why we come to work. So I'm glad to hear about that. I did have one last question over here. Sorry, I just wanted to find that. So I just want to reiterate one last time, not just for myself, because I do understand this, but I think more for the public. So of the base budget increase, we've got 4.6%, which happens to be $8.3 million. That is, it's just to keep up with inflation and for the regular pressures. 0.2% of that, which is $300,000 approximately, is the capital financing increase. So when you look at it, it's $8.6 million or 4.8%. That is really out of our control. That it's just inflationary pressures, which we're all feeling, whether it's at the gas station, restaurants, grocery stores, wherever else. That is part of it. It's the $4 million, which is a 2.3% increase that we're really, in my books, is that we're really talking about here, because again, when we look at the rest of it, that's inflationary, which is very difficult to control. It's the 4%, $4 million that I look at. I'm glad to see the the request for the 20 frontline officers and the support staff that would go along with that. I was really impressed with the presentation and the discussion and thought behind it and the way we've broken it out, because I think it's definitely a lot easier to understand when you're coming in at a different perspective. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Lawson. I'm just going to work my way around the table. Member Kiokio?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, she covered a lot of my questions. Though I just looking at the report, and thank you for reporting as you did, Chief. I go to page 13, and this is what's alarming to myself, and I think people outside, is the pressures that the service is getting. And I'm looking at the violent crimes from 2020 to 2022. It went from 3,648 to 4,158. Property crimes have gone up from 12,148 to 13,382. And especially, I'm looking at the mental health calls for service, an increase from 5,403 in 2020 to 11,574 in 2022. Now, these numbers are alarming, and I'm hoping, with the increase of staff, I'm hoping would these alleviate some of these numbers moving forward, like I don't know what 2023 will be like, but with new staffing, with partnerships, are we looking at more increases in these numbers or decrease with more staff that we have? Is the question, I guess.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Obviously, with the current complement of frontline officers that we have, I think what our challenge is that our officers are responding much more reactively to calls for service as opposed to proactively doing patrols in neighborhoods, patrols in the area of businesses. So we're optimistic with additional resources that it will increase officer availability, which will allow for more proactive patrol, which can assist with some of the property crime increase that we've seen there. Some of those other types of calls are difficult for us to really eliminate. We've seen a significant influx of violent crimes, gun violence, individuals who are transient in nature, who are coming to Niagara and committing crimes. Those are difficult for us to be able to proactively solve. But again, we've tried to take a holistic approach, and with the enhanced emphasis on crime analysis, we are hopeful that information sharing and intelligence gathering will provide us with enhanced knowledge and the ability to deploy our resources effectively, so that we know in advance of when particular incidents may happen, and we have an increased presence in those particular areas.
Great, thank you. Another, as the chair here stated, maternity and paternal under the workload studies, frontline workload studies. I'm looking at WSIB claims, and that's quite high as well. Now, how do we see that moving forward in the future? Are we looking at, what are we looking at to kind of decrease those numbers in different programs? What do we, like, I hate to see these numbers keep going up year after year, and I'd just like to see something in place where we kind of, you know, we look at decreasing these numbers rather than, are we being proactive as we move forward, I guess is my question.
Through you, Chair. Yes, the numbers are quite significant. We see about I think it's around 112% increase in the number of hours for WSIB claims. Obviously significant. In one thought, I am of the view that I think it's very positive in that we are breaking down the stigmas associated with mental health and PTSD and the psychological trauma that our officers are experiencing while they're, and not just our officers, but also our professional staff as well, given what they're exposed to on the job. 25 years ago, we did not have any supports in place to address those issues, and we take a much more holistic approach to that as well. And in terms of, we now have a full-time psychologist, a clinician, we have peer support teams, we have chaplains, we have a number of supports in place to try and enhance the resiliency of our members so that when they do experience PTSD or psychological trauma, we have resources in place to be able to deal with that issue as effectively and efficiently as possible, to get those individuals the supports and assistance they need to be able to get them physically and mentally well and be able to return to the workplace as quick as possible.
Okay, great, thank you. Just a couple more questions I have. In regards to, and I know you'll be asked this probably in the future, we're looking at 7.1% right now, I believe. How do we compare with other regions around, if you're able to, if you have any facts on that? And I guess the question also further to that is, are they experiencing the same concerns that we have with the service, like in respect to calls and WSIB and parental? Are we similar to other regions?
Through you, Chair, that's a great question. And although many of the police services have not, or they may be in the exact same sort of time frame as us, where they're in the process of presenting to their boards, and they haven't publicly announced what their increases are, but in collaboration between our various finance units, we've determined that the range of increases spans from about 5.98% to 9.5% in terms of increases. So we're middle of the pack, if you will. I can assure this board as well that many of the external influencers that we're seeing that are impacting our budget are also impacting other areas as well. Certainly, the presumptive PTSD legislation is having an impact for police services all across the province, as are the protected leaves. The exponential increase in response to persons in crisis are again impacting communities all across Ontario and all across Canada. So many of the challenges that we're experiencing, they're experiencing as well.
Great, thank you for that. One more question. This goes back to the 20 officers that are being recommended here, or constables. I think it was last year, the year before, when we actually hired 40, and I know part of it were you're going to put foot patrol on different areas of different communities. I know one of them was Welland, and it was very successful when it was started. We had a couple officers going to businesses, talking to people on the streets, and they loved it. But I don't see that, I haven't seen that in a while, and I'm just wondering, are we going to get back to that, or with these extra constables, will we see more people on foot?
Through you, Chair. That's really been the goal of our core unit. They've been we've received tremendous feedback from the community. We've asked for an additional core officer in the budget for Welland to address the growth that we're seeing in that area, and part of that community outreach is really key to their success. And so we very much. It's not a matter of getting back to it. We actually plan to enhance it in the Welland area as well. So,
no, it's good to hear. As I said, I had excellent feedback when it started. So, thank you.
Thanks.
That's all for now.
Thank you. Member Steele?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lots of questions. One thing, through the chair to the chief, the additional 20 officers. I don't remember discussing that at any meeting, that it's just kind of been brought to us through this budget. Did I miss something going back, that this was actually discussed or brought to us just to kind of talk about before today?
I wouldn't say that we have brought a report, but certainly as a result of the ongoing discussions and dialogues that we have had with the police association that the board has been a part of, the impacts associated with protected leave, sick leave, WSIB have all been part of those discussions. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to the board. And the request for 20 officers is really in response to us delving into the data a little bit deeper, following discussions and better understanding the factors that are impacting on our abilities to deploy officers on the front line.
I wouldn't say it's shouldn't come as a surprise. I mean, but I would have expected it to be discussed a little bit more during some of our meetings, but I won't go there now. The other thing that we've had in the past is we've had a good comparison between the Big 12. Now, in essence, I would take Toronto out of that because, I mean, the sheer size of Toronto, but with the other 10 services that we pretty much compare ourselves to on an ongoing basis. One thing I saw missing in this report was the fact that a chart just showing the number of staff broken down between officers and civilians with regards to how we compare to everybody else, and looking at population growth within those other areas, whether it's Hamilton, Waterloo, Windsor, so on and so forth, Peel, Durham. I think that's one thing that when you come forward with changes to the staff complement, it really gives us a better idea of how other police services are moving forward with what they're doing, and how we can have a good comparison. And I may be wrong in this, but I remember one of those charts that came through that, in fact, with a number of regions that were similar in size to us, our per capita number of police were actually greater than some of those. So again, I think that's important for this board to have, specifically, especially with new members, so that we can really look at the other services across Ontario and really do a good comparison of how they're doing and how we're doing. And the other issue there is land mass and the size of us compared to other areas where they have a lot less land mass to police. But it's still a good tool for us to move forward when we're actually setting our budget.
Chair, if I could just respond to that. The board will remember that there was a request that came forward from Regional Council, and we prepared a report that was presented to the board that provided a comparison of ourselves to the Big 12 and in particular to our other regional police services. Again, that compared budgets over the past several years, compared the number of increases in staff that have occurred over the number of years. So I know that the executive director may be able to share that again, and that's, we didn't include that because we had just provided that to the board recently. So it's something that we will include as we go forward and I know that report's been shared with Regional Council as well. So we'll ensure that we include that in our presentation to Council.
No, I understand that, and that's what I was referring to with bringing back my memory as far as in discussing that, and it was presented. But just as an appendix to this, I mean, we get this budget, and then we've got to go through it. Now I got to go digging for that. It should have been as an appendix. I just think it's important information when we have a budget package that we can easily zip back and forth between what's going on elsewhere and what we're doing here. And quite frankly, Chief, it's not only just for us, but it is for the public too. I mean, they don't necessarily have quick access to previous reports that come through. So as an appendix, I think it would have been good to add to it.
We can add that to the report when it comes forward for board approval on the 19th.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just think that's really good information for us to get and really, when we're scrolling through, a whole report here and your presentation, which is actually really good. I like the presentation, but added information is always better I mean, all due respect, this isn't chump change. Like, this is a lot of money. This is the biggest budget within the region. It's a big budget. And, for us to make a decision here on almost $200 million, it's huge. And just for us to go out, quite frankly, I heard it at Regional Council yesterday, what's going on in this budget, and already being questioned about it. So to have more information that when we're talking to our fellow regional councilors that we can explain things, it allows us to do our job even better. Under slide 17 of your presentation, just some clarifications here, and again, a lot of it for public knowledge. With regards to maternity and parental leave and WSIB, so in year when we have these, now, and I know it can go, somebody could leave in 2023 and still be off part of 2024. But in your budgets, how employment insurance and WSIB works, do we still save the dollars when those people are off as far as what their wages would be, that they're being compensated through either employment insurance or through WSIB, where we're not directly paying 100% of their wages? I just want a clarification on that.
I'll just have Ms. Laura Rula, our finance manager, come forward and she can respond to that question.
So through to the chair, you're correct that there is a component of the maternity pay that is paid through EI. We then top up to about 75% of the salary. But what you need to consider is when that officer is off, they are replaced typically with overtime. So any of the savings that we would have received from that differential is consumed with the overtime costs.
That was my follow-up, is where does that extra, not extra, but that saved dollars go, and it is to overtime. So I just want to make that a clarification. So Chief, how, with regards to, and again, so we're increasing our frontline force, we're adding, or moving around some positions within our civilian force. And as life changes, and we know it does, especially with technology, these things need to be done. I mean, it's been done forever. But how is sick time really affecting us? When we brought 40 officers on, we really thought that it would really help our overtime. But the trending that comes through, and again, I mean, some of these answers I know, because we've talked about this here. But I think the public needs to know, and our fellow counselors need to know. How is sick time affecting us at this stage since hiring the 40 new officers? And how do you see the 20 new frontline officers having an impact on that?
So through you, Chair, and obviously we've had significant discussions with the board and the association, and sick leave is certainly on the increase. We've had a significant increase in sick leave over the last. I mean, if you were to go over the last 10 years, it's been on a steady increase. There are a number of factors that play into that, and I don't think that we are alone in that regard. Police services across the province and employers, quite frankly, across the province are experiencing an increase in the use of sick leave. You know, we are optimistic through the ongoing discussions with the association, with the hiring of disability management specialists, with the hiring of accommodation specialists, that we're able to get people back to the workplace quicker and reduce the impact from sick leave, so that organizationally it's not as significant a factor.
Thank you. Slide 18 talks about targeted response times. They're not being met for the districts 1, 2, and 3. Just to enhance upon that, the cause, is it just sheer call volume, especially in those 3 districts?
Yeah, I think through you, Chair, it's a combination of a number of factors. At the information session that we had for regional councillors, I kind of walked the board and council through the realities that we experience each and every day, twice a day, around the issue of cross-district deployment. And where we might have 5 additional officers in St. Catharines, in one district that is responsible for policing, say, St. Catharines and Thorold, due to staffing requirements that are outlined in our collective agreement, those additional resources are being redeployed to 8 district, redeployed to 6 district. So the result is that we're always at our minimum staffing requirement, and we never have additional resources to assist in making any headway or ground on improving our response times to situations. So you've often heard it from the association as well during some of the discussions that we've had, that our minimum staffing has become our maximum staffing. And again, cross-district deployment is one of those factors. And the additional resources are intended to augment the staffing in the smaller districts so that we don't have to rely upon taking officers from the bigger districts where there are increased call volume, increased complexity of calls and social issues that are impacting the bigger cities that may not necessarily be impacting some of the smaller districts as well.
Great, thanks. Last question this time, just to follow up on Member Kyokyo's questions and comments with regards to the increase in this slide, which is page 13. You broke it down into 4. I'm going to zero in on the mental health calls for service. I mean, more than doubled in 2 years, which is concerning. And I think it's concerning for not just this board, but, you know, for every municipality across Niagara, you know, what's going on within their municipalities. Is it possible, and again, it may not be for budget, but I think it relates to budget. Can we really get is it possible to get a breakdown of kind of the severity of these types of calls? Because as we know, and we've discussed around this table, some of these calls you can go out to, and it's you know, I'll look at the violent side of calls. There really isn't anything that would worry the person attending that it's going to be a really violent thing. But you can attend, and there can be quite a bit of violence. You know, we've seen it across Canada over the last year with a number of officers being shot as they enter a home based on mental health calls. But can we really dig down into these calls as far as kind of severities with them and how it's working? And I know with Canadian Mental Health working with us and riding along with us, it really gives this board a direction, I think, as we move forward. Because if you're doubling these calls, it comes with a huge cost to this organization. And that's a monetary cost. And it's really reflected in a budget, and specifically this budget, on why we're looking for more officers. And you know, that's the only one that here it's doubled. Like, if you look at violent crimes, they actually fell over last year. You know, they're a little higher in 21, and they fell in 22. Although by about 8, but still, it's something that fell. Property crimes are up a little bit. Armed barricades are actually down about 80 calls. So some of these, although they keep trending up, are fluctuating from year to year, which we've seen over the last number of years of all crimes. Mental health really concerns me as far as how we respond, how our officers respond, comments by other members with regards to how it's affecting the frontline officer on their own mental health care. Because I think that really takes us to further that, you know, the advocacy that we need to do as a board, the advocacy we need to get other boards involved, get our police associations, both at the senior level and at the frontline level, involved across the province in advocating with the government to speed up funding for better mental health services from police forces. Because again, we all know it, quite frankly, I don't think every call needs to be a police officer, but God help us the first time we send somebody out and we don't have an officer there and something happens. I mean, that's the real fine line that we've got to really balance here. Also, the regulations that are put out under the Police Act, and that we have to fall under as a police service board, and as well as the police service just in itself, and how our officers are responding. I think changes need to be made so that, you know, life has changed so much. I mean, we can think back, and you know, being somebody that's 61 years old, we can think back that, you know, even in the 80s, you just didn't seem to have this type of thing, and then all of a sudden, it's really come full bore towards policing in the number of calls. Almost 12,000 calls are for mental health. The only other one is property crimes, which is a little over 13, almost 13,500. But armed robberies and violent crimes aren't even half of the number of mental health calls. So we can see where policing is going. We can see the decisions that this board and this service has to make moving forward. But I really think we need a huge concerted effort with our counterparts to really pressure the province with regards to how policing and mental health is handled in this province. And because I'll tell you right now, this 7.8, I think you said, Madam Chair, was the total? 7.1? A lot of it has to do with mental health. We know that, and it's WSIB claims, it's sick time, it's the sheer volume of calls that add to the numbers that we need for frontline policing. So I know you're not gonna give us the answer today, but I think that needs to be said when we're moving through a budget at 7.1% and how we're gonna take this back to the region with regards to what's going on. We've got to find better things to do, but we can't do it on our own. We do need help from across the province on these issues. So I just think that advocacy work needs to start, and you know, moving forward in time, you know, it can help in how we actually develop our budgets and do that.
Just before you respond, Chief, because I'm going to say something and maybe then you can add to it. Member Steele wouldn't know this because you don't sit on Public Health and Social Services Committee. In June, we asked the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan Action Table to investigate the options for responding to mental health calls, collect data on how many mental health calls have been responded to by police, EMS, and their respective mental health teams, collect data on the types of mental health calls to which each team is responding, report back the costs for each service, and recommend options for refining the triaging of those calls. And the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan Action Table is supposed to report back to us January 2024. Chief.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, Chair, to Member Steele. Obviously, it's a very complicated issue, and there's a multitude of factors that are sort of entwined within. So it's not just that we're responding to somebody in a mental health crisis. There can be addictions involved. There can be criminality involved. There can be threats of violence or actual violence that have occurred. All of those things combined create a really difficult situation to assess, and quite frankly, you're 100% right. Many of the calls, or a number of the calls, can be responded to by other agencies. The problem is those other agencies don't exist right now. They don't exist 24/7. So we have become the agency of first resort and the agency of last resort to respond to these types of calls. But I can tell you that a good percentage of those calls are, again, they're complicated. There's, and certainly Member McKendrick would have some appreciation as to the intersectionality of all of those different issues that combined to make a very difficult situation that our officers are responding to. I wish that there was other agencies available that could assist in assisting with those responses. EMS and ourselves have worked very collaboratively together to try and triage the calls for service that are coming in, and there are a number of calls that are going directly to EMS once they come in through our 911 center, and we're not having any involvement in those calls whatsoever. And in some cases, they're initially going to EMS, and then EMS is calling us for assistance because of the complexity of the calls and the individuals that they're faced with. So, you know, I think the creation of more situation tables across the region, I think, will assist in being able to bring all of the stakeholders together as we move forward to try and establish somebody who's in crisis and the appropriate agency that can take the lead on trying to resolve whatever issues they may be experiencing. And I know that the plan for the community safety and well-being plan for the region is to expand situation tables later this fall and into 2024. Again, the goal is to help reduce those number of calls for service. But I would just, again, highlight that if this was something that was unique to Niagara, then we were doing something wrong. but it's not unique to Niagara. It's happening all across Canada, unfortunately. So, you know, is there room for advocacy? 100% there is, from the region's perspective and from the board's perspective on getting assistance, both on a provincial and national level, on how to address the mental health crisis that's occurring across this country.
Thanks, Chief, and through the chair to you again. Staying on this topic, with regards to our partnership with Canadian Mental Health and how they're riding along with our officers and dealing with calls up front, we've expanded that into the District 3, which is the Welland-Pelham area. Have we seen are we seeing really good results from that it actually is alleviating some of the issues that we were having before? And that's really where I was going with the advocating part of it, is that and funding. I mean, that helps Member McKendrick's organization with regards to hiring more people and partnering with the NRP with regards to those ride-alongs and working and really spreading it out across Niagara, or even increasing it in our larger municipalities that are having a greater issue with mental health calls. But that program, I know it hasn't been the longest time out of the Welland office, but we are seeing fruits of our labor with regards to that program, especially now that's been expanded.
So through you, Chair, I think the results of our MCERT program have been very effective in reducing the number of mental health apprehensions and connecting individuals with appropriate resources in the community. I think that's been probably the most significant gain that has been achieved through the MCERT program. The issue that we have in Welland is we don't have sustainable funding. And again, the MCERT program is being funded through grants, and that is not ideally the best way to address a crisis, quite frankly, that I can only imagine as the Canadian Mental Health Association, who provides us with staff, how they go about staffing an MCERT program in Welland that has funding up until March 31st. And we have not, as a board, you have not received the MOU from the province as of yet, so we don't even know what the funding actually is, whether it's $120,000 prorated, because there's only so many months left in the calendar year, or if the executive director of the CMHA actually has $120,000 to go out and hire staff to be able to perform that job, knowing that the funding ends on March 31st, 2024, and the difficult position that the CMHA will be in terms of hiring personnel for a job that could potentially end on March 31st, 2024. So sustainable long-term funding, I think, is one of the solutions that will be most welcome in addressing the situation.
Yeah, thank you for that, because that goes right to the point I'm trying to make here, is the fact that once that ends, it really takes away all that good work that the two organizations as partners have done here. And then now we're back at square one. So again, that's where it goes back to our advocacy and our funding within the province. And we all know it's Canada-wide, but I mean, we can only concern ourselves with Ontario because that's the rules and the funding that we receive. So anyways, that's the end of my questions this time, and thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Member McKendrick, knowing that you prefer to go last, Chair Lawson has indicated that she has some questions. Would you like her to go before you do?
Well, I wonder if it's a nice segue for me to go. I'm okay not going
go ahead,
last.
Member McKendrick.
I've seen the benefits of, a lot of my questions have been asked and answered, and I feel like it's a nice segue to mine. So just going back to the reality and pressures that you introduced the budget was based on, I'm appreciating the thoughtfulness and responsiveness and recognizing the juggle between being proactive and reactive in making these decisions, as well as Member Yips pointing out what's in our control and out of our control. And I think part of the mental health call increase conversation is, as a police board and a service, partly out of our control. And I see the service trying to be proactive from a member wellness perspective, as well as a adequate and efficient response to mental health calls. When we're talking about advocacy, though, and also recognizing that there's a lot of work going on with community safety and well-being, situation tables, 911 action table, but I would be remiss if I didn't jump off of Member Steele's advocacy for advocacy, to expand that circle a bit, that it's I think the intent is for it to not be a police response and to be an advocacy for community response and resources being in the community for earlier intervention and prevention. I am appreciative of additional funding for crisis response teams. I think collectively our preference is to not need crisis response teams because people are getting service that they need earlier in a preventative way, and that needs to come from advocacy from other ministries, other funding sources, rather than continuing to be an expectation of a police response or our officers needing to be mental health workers. So really advocacy to reduce crisis and provide what is needed in community at other times and other levels. So I would be remiss if I didn't say that. Appreciate sorry, got caught up in that. Appreciate the focus on the mental health of the service members and just wanting public awareness that it's not only the wellness of the members, but the impact that that ultimately has on the service that they receive in the community and public safety. It's healthier, it's safer, and it's more cost efficient long run, so it hits all the boxes. And I just wanted to ask, because we've had a lot of really good questions, but wonder if it's helpful to highlight the board portion of the budget for public awareness. I know I get questions about the board portion, which is almost $1 million of the overall budget, and just looking for an opportunity to clarify why the board portion of the budget is almost $1 million, and just for public awareness that there's legal fees and the costs that the board has within this budget just for public awareness. And I'm not sure who best to answer that.
Executive Director Reed, yes.
Yes, through you, Chair. Thank you, Member McKendrick. The board did approve a budget, a 2.21% increase, which was about $21,000. Majority of the funding is, as you're correct, is legal expenses as well as staff total compensation.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the benefit of going last.
Well, I won't exclude you from going again if more questions arise from Chair Lawson.
Thank you. So to further on Member Steele's comments, I agree. I think it's a great idea to put in the, maybe it's a reference link or it's as an appendix, our September 8th meeting that we had with 10 of our regional colleagues who attended the presentation, and it was shared with the rest of the regional council. So it would be a good reminder to have that available to them in one document so that they're not having to flip back and forth, because it was a very thorough presentation explaining why we needed these 20 other officers, not necessarily the officers themselves, but explaining the complexities of the policing and all of those that are involved in a call. I think that's important. I do want to talk, Member Steele mentioned about slide 13. It seems to be the popular slide right now for violent crimes, property crimes, mental health, and armed barricaded. So going back to that, if you actually compare 2020 to 2022, so let's take 2021 out of that, and you take a look. So we've got property crimes being number one, which again was probably the justice system that we need to take a look back at. Is probably, from what I remember from previous presentations, a lot of the times it's the same people who are committing the crimes and they're just getting back out on from bail. So maybe bail reform, again, we have to talk to our our provincial colleagues. Mental health, we see we're at 11,574 calls, which is 114% increase. Again, supporting and having money go towards CAMH would be important. So rather than our organizations, as Member McKendrick talked about, being reactive, we can actually be proactive and preventing these mental health crises perhaps in future, then thus not needing the police as much. So I feel that this budget, I don't want it to be lost that the response to this budget is we are in a position where we have to be reactionary because we don't have those proactive positions in place from the province. So when I look at a lot of this, again, we're reactionary to provincial decisions. So provincial decisions of WSIB, provincial decisions of protected leaves, reactions to justice requirements, mental health requirements. So our budget is often reactionary to decisions that are made at a different level, and I'm very much for if there's a way for the region and or our police board and or boards across the province to have a discussion with the province and say, like, how do we solve this as a bigger issue? Because all of our budgets will continue to increase if we don't put the budgets in the right place to begin with. That being said, if we didn't, my question would be, if we didn't put those 20 officers, frontline officers in place, what would the potential outcome be? I understand you can't completely answer that, but if we didn't put the 20 officers in place, what would the potential outcome be, given the fact that our population in Niagara is increasing?
Through you, Chair, as I talked in our information session with Council a few weeks back now, one of the challenges that we face twice a day, every single day, is this jockeying of personnel around the region to ensure that we're meeting our minimum staffing requirements, which we're obligated to provide within the collective agreement. So a couple points with regards to your question. There would be increased reliance on us to continue relying on cross-district deployment to try and fulfill our minimum staffing requirements in districts all across the region. And that only goes so far because the reality is then we rely on overtime, and we're also our younger generation of officers that we are hiring have got work-life balance figured out much better than we do, and are less willing to give up their days off and come in and work overtime, which puts us in a really precarious position again, where I don't have temporary employees. Like I know we're often compared to the hospital stream where they have casual temporary employees. I don't have that luxury. I have the luxury of cross-district deployment. I have the option of pulling officers out of investigative units like child abuse, like domestic violence unit, like our sexual assault unit, like our district detective offices, and redeploying those officers to the front line in order to ensure that we're fulfilling our minimum staffing requirements. Again, because of staffing, those same units have their own challenges in terms of staffing. They're entitled to annual leave and vacation the same as everybody else, and they're not often in a position to be able to redeploy from those units to assist on our front line. But when they do assist, that's taking them away from investigating crimes and looking out for victims of crime and advocating for victims of crime, and ensuring that we're able to solve and investigate those crimes as thoroughly and as promptly as we would like to and are expected to. So again, the result will be that we will in all likelihood, go short on the front line. That's, I'm preparing the board and preparing, I guess, regional council in our community that that's the realities that we face on a daily basis, that there's this shell game of trying to ensure that we have sufficient resources on the road to be able to meet our obligation in providing public safety at a time when things have never been more challenging and more complex for police services across this country.
Thank you. To expand on that, then, is not only is it the increase in our population, but the increase in the complexity, increase in the types of calls, and going back into Member Steele's comments about maybe the money's not being spent necessarily in the right place right now, because we do need additional supports in things like mental health and other areas. One of the comments that Member Kiokio and Member Steele both touched on was the percentage of sick time and WSIB. And one of the questions was, are we expecting the percentages to decline if we add these additional 20 officers and or the staff members? I think we'd be remiss not to identify the fact that those people also get sick, which would mean that they could potentially also be off. And as you add more people, you would hope to see the numbers go down, but I would hope that we're not just looking at the overall numbers, because I think it's a little bit misleading when we look at things like, if we go back to slide 13, just as the example for property crimes, we see 13,382. When you look at the percentage, it depends on how you're talking about the item. So when you're looking at sick numbers and WSIB as far as a percentage overall to the number of staff would be a helpful stat to see. Are we seeing a percentage decrease in the overall percentage of sick time and WSIB to the number of staff that we have? Would be an indicator to me that we are actually meeting our goals rather than just the actual number, because theoretically, as you're adding more people, that number will go up, but the percentage could be coming down because less people are now taking that time off. So I think that would be an important addition to that slide, to show what the percentage overall is, that if we're seeing a decline year over year, based on the number of overall officers and or civilian members as well, would be helpful. I think that was all the comments that I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Lawson. Or Member Kapasavanan?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to the Chief. I just wanted to find out, I'm going to take us back to the program changes and slide 13 as well. I'm really happy to see that there has been a budget allocated to data collection and an extra person put in there for data collection. But I just wanted to find out, within that role, has any thought been put towards collection of more disaggregated data? Because I see here we've got these four, and I'm hoping these are not the only demographics that we're looking at when we're looking at numbers. But if we're looking at violent crimes, is there room within this new role for people to break that down even further, so that, like you said, the data is going to inform whether it's policy or allocation of funds and whatnot? Are we going to expand the demographics for the data collection? And my second one would be, the second question is not related to this, but it's going back to I saw that within the budget, most of the things are increased, but there was one decrease that really struck me, and that's under investigation expenses. And if you could just explain to us what investigation expenses are, and reassure some of us that the cutting of that within the budget does not interfere with investigation processes and procedures as well. Thank you.
So, through you, Chair, with regards to the first question and data and crime analysis, obviously that's our goal and our hope with adding the additional crime analyst and the additional crime analyst supervisor, is to enhance the capacity and the abilities of all of our crime analysts across the service to be able to delve in deeper, to get that deeper dive into what's going on, to enhance their training. Right now, we don't have a consistent, we don't have a supervisor that they report to, and this will ensure that a supervisor who's skilled and trained and at a higher level is able to impart those same knowledge and skills across all of our crime analysts, which will in turn give us much more predictive analysis and details with regards to what's occurring within our community. And sorry, the second question was regards to the investigative expenses. So investigative expenses, and I may call upon Laura to sort of top up my response, but those are really dependent upon the types of crimes that we're incurring. Like if it's a large-scale organized crime project or investigation that we are undertaking that can sometimes take a year to 2 years to undertake those types of large-scale projects, you may see that those expenses are larger in certain years, so they tend to fluctuate based on the types of investigations that we're undertaking in a particular year. So I guess I would want to reassure the public that there are adequate funds available to be able to address the ebbs and flows of crimes and trends that are occurring when we need it and when it's appropriate to do so.
Thank you, Chief.
Member Kyokyo?
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the 20 frontline constables, and I know Chair Lawson already asked the question. She always beats me to it. And I'm glad your response was, what my question was, what if we didn't approve the 20 constables? And you gave a good response, and one of them was that we'd be short on frontline staff. And you compared that to the hospital system where they're able to utilize other agencies and the police services just doesn't have that option. Is there another system, are you looking at another system in place? Are we looking at, I don't have an answer to this, but are we looking at anything else that we can do rather than every year coming back and hiring more and more constables simply for the fact, as Jen stated, they get sick as well. They can go off on WSIB as well. So, but is there a system that we can look at? I know we had this discussion with Councillor Easton when we had the report to council here last month. And I just, is there an answer to that, Chief? Is there anything that we can do moving forward? I don't know if it becomes a contract issue or is there any other system that you tried to look at? If not, just, if there isn't an answer to this, just let me know.
Through you, Chair. I wish I had a better answer for you, but unfortunately there's not a lot of room in terms, I don't have the ability of hiring part-time police officers. I have the ability of hiring fully trained police officers. There are avenues that we can look to explore in conjunction with our association where there could be the ability to utilize part-time officers to assist with certain functions. I know other organizations are looking at that for managing crime scenes, et cetera, but again, that would represent a very small percentage of our overall budget. But again, those are things that would have to involve some further discussion between the board and the association.
All right, I just thought I'd ask the question now because I'm sure it's going to come up at regional council as well. My second question is, you might not be, finance might be able to answer this. Just the 20 frontline constables, what percentage of that is that of our budget? Just for my knowledge. Is it in the report?
If, through you, Chair, if you could just, my finance unit will be getting their calculators engaged and we'll let you know what that percentage is. One thing I would talk about that things that we're doing to try and assist and offset the impact on our frontline officers. A number of initiatives that we, have undertaken. The mobile support unit is one such area where we are always going to have accommodated staff where they've sustained an injury, where they're not able to perform frontline patrol duties. So we utilize those officers to assist in being able to manage sort of lower priority response calls that the officers can follow up with a phone call, they can exchange information through email, et cetera. Again, that assists us in reducing the call volume from our front line, but it also allows us to get meaningful work out of our members who are, through no fault of their own, or in an accommodated position.
Thank you, Chief. Maybe to save Ms. Rouleau a walk to the podium, page 5 of the report indicates that 20 frontline constables is a cost of $1,526,499, or 0.9% increase.
Well, here in the report it says 3,052,000. And is that the
So if you go
20
to-
constables? What?
On page 5, if you go to the bottom of that chart, is he looking at the right?
No, I don't.
On page 5
Oh,
of the.
okay,
yeah.
okay, I'm just going by the report that the chief gave us, and it just
The
showed
presentation.
3 million, presentation, showed 3 million.
Go ahead.
I was going to have Superintendent Lagrataria who can explain that for us.
Okay.
Superintendent?
Hi, thanks through you, Chair. The $3 million for the 20 constables would equate to 1.6 of the total budget. Of the 7.1% ask, it's 0.9%.
Member, I'm going to go to Member Steele first.
Thanks. Yeah, so just taking off on Member Kyokyo, so the 1.5 million is because it's not a full year that we're, by the time you hire people and bring them on board. So through to our I want to say CFO, but that's my guy in port. What's your title, Ms. Rollo? Are you the chief
Finance manager.
Finance manager, okay. Manager of finance, sorry. Don't want to give her a title that may increase her pay. We don't want that. Anyways, Ms. Rollo, 1% of our budget is approximately how much in dollars?
$1.8 million.
So $1.8 million equates to 1% change in our 7.1% increase. Right? Okay. She's nodding yes, just for those that, because she doesn't have a microphone at the back there. Okay. Chief, if we look at the increase in complement across the board, and we take some of these additions and cut them in half, as far as do half of them in 2024 and the other half in 2025. And I know you answered Member Kyokyo's question similar to that, but is it a huge burden at this time? If we, as a board, said, okay, we'll take the number of positions that you want as an increase, and we reduce some of those by 50%. And the ones I'm specifically looking at is if we go 10 and 10 over 24 and 25 for our frontline constables, you have 4 digital evidence management system clerks. Like, is it imperative you need all 4 in 2024? Can you go 2 and 2? There's a couple here that, I mean, when you're adding detectives in, I think those are imperative that we add those numbers, both for District 3 and the opioid enforcement and education, due to the fact of what's going on in those areas. But specifically, if we went 50% of a couple of these, is that something that you're going to say, no, it's out of the question, or is that something that the service can work with?
Through you, Chair, I think one of the things that the board needs to be alive to is that we had requests far in excess of what we put forward as program changes, legitimate program changes. Some of what you're seeing come forward this year are program changes that we deferred from last year. So, you know, is there an opportunity to defer some of those till next year? I mean, there's the possibility of that, but again, I think the challenge that we face as a police service is there's no guarantee that the board or regional council will approve that next year. So what we've put forward is what we believe is a realistic expectation. We've had areas across the service members who have put up the white flag and said, I need help. I cannot continue to do this. Some of the positions that we have asked for are single points of failure. So if we don't add to the complement we have, like as the training coordinator, single point of failure. We have one person that does that. And the volume of work is beyond what that person can bear. So again, white flags are going up, they're asking for assistance, and we're being responsive to the needs of our people, recognizing the impact that workload and having a positive work environment has on their productivity in the workplace.
Okay, thanks for that. I mean, I'm just looking at what we're going to be faced with as the three of us that are going into regional council, and you'll be taking a lot of questions, but we'll be taking a lot of questions. And on behalf of the service, the three of us are going to have to argue things that are going to come forward to us. One thing I want to point out, the 2 additional budget days, which is $1 million, we had a budget surplus last year where we could have taken $1 million and put it into a reserve for this year. We were voted down, not by a lot, but we were voted down that $1 million goes back to the region. Now here we are asking for it again. This is exactly what I talked about last year. That's 0.5% of an increase. Well, they're just giving them the $1 million back that we gave them. So to me, there's 0.5 that they should be able to really realistically look at our increase and really reduce it by 0.5%. Doesn't seem like a lot, but it is $1 million. But if we're allowed to take these dollars that are within our budget and just leave them there for such things as the 2 additional budget days, then you know, we're going back, and those are questions we can answer. And I will be talking about that again at regional council. That was just a bad decision by council, very bad decision. And quite frankly, bad information coming out of staff at that meeting. I was not happy about that. And I understand what you're saying, Chief, that you're right. I mean, yeah, things can't get done. I'm just trying to look at things and be able to answer these questions when we have to go to, you know, 32 voting members at regional council, and you give your report to them, and you do your presentation and how we can best answer these questions so that we're given the best information possible to say, this is why we need to be where we're at today. So, anyways, thanks.
Understood. Thanks.
Chair Lawson?
Thank you. I love talking budget. I know most people don't, but that's okay. A couple of questions. So back to Member Steele's comments about operationally, what do we really need? I think it would also be helpful, I'm not sure whether the budget presentation is the right or whether it was the September 8th presentation where we should have done that, to indicate what we would really want to be asking for. So what would if we had unlimited funds, which I know we don't, but it's a question that most organizations ask, if not just policing, but if we had unlimited funds, what would we really like to see, and where would we be investing our dollars in, compared to what we're actually bringing forward as our budget, I think is an important number for people to see. So if, I don't know, we've said 20 frontline officers, if in an ideal situation, not thinking about, what the money looks like, if we really needed 60, but we're saying that we only need 20, like we'll make do with 20, I think that's an important number that people have to understand when they're taking a look at budgets. Most people don't work with these types of numbers. Most people don't understand what $1 million is. They don't understand what $190 million is. So because we all put it back onto what we earn or have available to us. So I think from a public's perspective, I think it's important to understand what it takes to run an organization, whether it's policing, the region, municipality. We all have those different challenges that we have to understand. So I think it's important to put in there. I go back to the September 8th presentation. I think we need to talk about that more. We've started this education process. That was the intent of this, is to keep going back to the September 8th presentation that we did to Regional Council, just to understand what policing challenges we have. It was not to talk about the budget at all. It was to talk about what the region, or what the municipality needs and the region needs from a policing perspective, what's entailed when there is a call. Most people probably understand because there was an incident yesterday in Vineland, without talking about all of the details here on this meeting, but I'm sure that it took away members from other districts for extended periods of time to deal with a crisis that was required, which unfortunately was a mental health crisis. So I would be concerned if we had sent just CAMH to that call by themselves, what would the outcome be? Obviously, that's not the right outcome. We've had many different things happen where we have to redeploy our staff and everything else, but I think it's really important for the public and our regional councils members to understand we're not asking, I don't know operationally, and I wouldn't imagine any of us understand operationally what's actually needed, but I think it's important for us to understand at least a high level. Is it 60 officers that we really needed, or is it that we're asking for 20? I think that's an important distinction within the presentations that we need to see. And this will be my last comment. I won't put my hand up anymore, but it's more of a rhetorical comment and question. But if people behaved accordingly, didn't commit crime, population is stagnant and or declined within the region, we have this proper supports in place from the other provincial organizations such as CAMH or the justice system and everything else, would we have to rely on the police as much, which would increase which would decline in our budget then? That was a rhetorical question.
Sorry, if I can just add a response. I know that, there are some pilot projects that are going on around the province right now with respect to, we've talked about when somebody calls 911, do you need police, fire, or ambulance, to having a fourth entity being mental health services. And so there are some pilot projects that are going on right now, and, Toronto being one of those areas, and some communities that are having strictly a mental health response team respond to those calls for service. And I think the statistics to this point in time, demonstrate quite clearly that it's not a panacea, that it is not going to eliminate 90% of the calls for service. It has demonstrated that it takes away a very, very small percentage of calls that allow for mental health community service providers to be able to deal specifically with low acuity types of calls. Again, because of the intersectionality with all of the complexities associated with mental health, criminality, addictions, and unpredictable behavior, and we're seeing that more and more where there are unpredictable violent outbursts against, we've just heard it in the news about paramedics being assaulted. I can tell you that our officers are assaulted on a regular basis, daily basis. So it's not unique to paramedics. It's happening with our members on a daily basis. So the panacea that we are going to inject more resources into the community and that's going to take away all of the mental health calls, it's not going to happen. Will it assist? It absolutely will. And I've said it, and I will continue to say it. we don't want to be able to have to respond to mental health calls. The unfortunate part is that, again, because of the uncertainty around a number of the calls that our officers are responding to, we need to be at those calls because, again, of all of the complexities.
Thank you, Chief. I think I would also point out, I mean, obviously, having a fourth service is complex. There are a number of factors that go into that. If somebody, in talking about members of the public, if members of the public are coming at it strictly from the budget cost, that fourth service will be extremely expensive. So you're going to pay for it. You're going to pay for it somewhere. Are there any other questions? Member Kiokio?
Just one quick question to you, Chief. Is there anything that we've applied for any funding for the upcoming future that could possibly affect this budget?
Through you, Chair, we take advantage of every single grant funding opportunity, and this recent announcement yesterday with regards to the MCERT enhancement grant is an example of where we've leveraged every opportunity we can. At the present time, I'm not aware of any future grants that we can apply for, but rest assured, the community can be rest assured as well that each and every time that there is a grant opportunity, we will take full advantage of it.
Any further questions? Thank you. Before we move back to the motion and the vote, I have something that I would like us to consider. I'll speak very briefly to it, and then I'll ask for a motion since I cannot move anything sitting in the chair. So before we move back to the motion and the vote, I would like us to consider an increase to the contribution that's been provided to Victim Services Niagara. It's my understanding that for the last 13 years, Victim Services Niagara has received $50,000 per year in 2 installments of $25,000 each from NRPS. Prior to 2010, they received $45,000 per year. This $50,000 contribution represents approximately 11% of Victim Services Niagara's budget. Their other sources of funding are Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services for 66% of their current budget, and the remaining 23% of their current budget comes from fundraising, grants, and donations. Given how important their work is and, of course, the impacts of inflation and other pressures on their work, particularly without an increase for 13 years, I think it's time for an increase to their budget from NRPS. So I would like to recommend that we increase NRPS's contribution to Victim Services Niagara by $15,000, which would bring the total to $65,000, or approximately 15% of Victim Services Niagara's overall budget. I would note that $15,000 represents 0.0078%, or less than 1/100th% of the budget that's been presented to us today. Can I have members McKendrick and Steele move that Niagara Regional Police Service increase its annual contribution to Victim Services Niagara by $15,000, bringing the total annual contribution from NRPS to Victim Services Niagara from $50,000 to $65,000. So moved. Thank you. Any discussion? Mr. Steele?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just through you to the service, can you give us an overview of our relationship with Victim Services and how this came about as far as how we do a funding to them, or do funding to them, just so that people watching know exactly what this is all about?
So through you, we have, through you to the chair, we have an excellent working relationship with Victim Services Niagara. They are situated within our headquarters facility here. They are a separate entity, but they, again, very close ties and partnership. They perform tremendous work in dealing with victims of crime and victims of tragic circumstance. They assist us with doing risk assessments for individuals and who are the victims of intimate partner violence. They assist with providing alarms DVRS alarms to individuals who are at high risk of being re-victimized of domestic violence. We as a board and as a service, we fund 4 community partners, one of them being Victim Services Niagara, Crime Stoppers of Niagara, the Children's Safety Village, and the Child Advocacy Center, Krista French Child Advocacy Center. 3 of those agencies are currently receive $50,000 a year annually, and the Advocacy Center receives $100,000 a year annually. I can't speak highly enough about the work that Victim Services Niagara does. I was formerly on the board of directors with that organization, was previously the board chair, as was Deputy Flynn, and I believe Stephanie Sabrin is the current chair of Victim Services Niagara. So we have a very close-knit, collaborative working relationship with that organization.
Great, Chief, thank you.
Chair Lawson.
Thanks. Just a quick question. What would you estimate the value of the services that we receive from Victim Services that we're obviously not doing here? So could you put a value on that?
Through you, Chair. If we look at what we currently pay, $50,000 a year would not pay the equivalent of 50% of a full-time equivalent employee. Victims assistance is something that's mandated under the Police Services Act. And quite frankly, I believe we receive a tremendous return on investment on the $50,000 and potentially the $65,000 as is being advocated for with regards to what we receive from that organization.
Thank you. I have a comment after, but I'll let Member McKendrick go.
Member McKendrick?
Thank you. I just wanted to add my own experience in support of the work that Victim Services does and impact here when I was speaking earlier about early intervention and prevention, the support that they provide to those impacted by crime and tragic circumstances, including children from an earlier intervention is priceless. So I wouldn't be able to estimate that, as well as seeing the potential and not even the potential, witnessing the ability to free up our officers to respond and be at other situations while also ensuring that there's support left in the situation for those impacted. So just, it's priceless, wouldn't be able to say and fully support the recommendation that we do contribute. So thank you.
Chair Lawson.
Thank you. So I would actually propose that instead of 65,000, that we actually move that to 75,000.
Mover and seconder, is that a friendly amendment? Any other discussion about this motion before we move to the main motion? Okay, so I'll call the vote on this as we are now increasing by 25,000 to 75,000 for Victim Services Niagara. I'll call the vote on that, and then we'll move to the main motion. So all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
You okay? Can I go? Thanks. Thanks, Chair. Through to the Chief. So moving forward, I mean, as was mentioned, we fund 4 organizations. So we obviously don't have a policy at this time that has, whether it's annual or every 5 years or whatever it may be, that there could be an increase to it, an automatic increase that can be built into our budget. Because do the other organizations come forward and say, no, we want more money? I mean, that's really where you are. So maybe moving forward into 2024, when we're talking about 2025's budget, that if we could have staff put a policy together for the board to move forward with how we fund those 4 specific organizations. And if this board wants to, I mean, some of it will have to stay open because I think a report will need to come to us so that we can give direction for the final policy, but, so that we know moving forward, as opposed to these just coming to us every once in a while, that there's actually a formula that can be built to help fund these organizations. It's like anything else. You know, 50,000, 13 years ago might have been a lot of money, but today, for the help that they do, doesn't seem like a lot of money.
Through you, Chair, we can certainly put something together, but I don't mean to be passing the buck, but this is something where groups have come to the board and advocated for funding, and I'm wondering if it's a board policy as opposed to a service policy.
Okay, I'll go through to our executive director. Can we put something that together for the board for the budget
I can
process?
certainly do that, take that under, as direction, and I can work with the service as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Sorry about that, Deb.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so moving back to the main motion, which I've amended with the additional $25,000, so it will be read out correctly. The motion being that the Finance Committee recommend to the Police Services Board receive and approve the proposed 2024 operating budget for the Police Service and the Police Services Board, resulting in a total net expenditure budget before indirect allocations of $190,475,582, and further, that the consolidated budget of the service and the board be submitted to Regional Council for approval. That was again moved by members Steele and Kiokio. All those in favor? Thank you, that's carried. And do any board members have any other new business? Seeing none. Chief, did you have anything? It says to ask you.
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.